Well, here's a bodyguard that you can trust more than the Secret Service. This is the new Bodyguard 2.0. Today, we're going to talk about all of the features. We're going to compare it to some other popular concealed carry guns and talk about everything that they've changed with this gun compared to the original Bodyguard and give you my overall opinion. There's one thing I have a little bit of reservation about with this gun. I'm a little bit concerned with it, so I will mention that as well. But overall, you're going to know pretty much everything you need to about the new Bodyguard. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. Let's go and get into it. By the way, big thanks to Smith & Wesson for sending this out so I can give you my honest opinion on it. Good, bad, or indifferent, we're going to go through it all. But again, thanks to those guys for sending this one out. Now, the first thing I noticed is slide serration. So they actually wrap over the top of the slide there, and now they've officially gotten away from fish scale style and went more to a vertical style, and it makes such a big difference. They are much better than even the fish scale style, which I always liked, but this is better. And they actually extended them up in the front. So for a number of years, they've put front serrations on the gun, but yet they only came up like, you know, a quarter of the way up the slide. So it never really made a lot of sense. Now they have fixed that. The sights, you have a tritium front dot there and an orange ring, very similar to what we saw on the Shield Plus 30 Super Carry. And then we have a U-notch blacked out in the rear. We also have some indexing points, right? I imagine guys like Hickok and some of the other dudes that are much bigger than me will probably be able to index this gun, but they'll have to be careful because I'm sure their index finger extends way past the slide. So anyways, there's that. But me, it's kind of a perfect indexing point, to be honest with you. They actually have some stippling on the takedown lever. About half of it is covered up with that aggressive stippling. Really smart move there because a lot of these controls are just harder to work on these smaller guns. And so by doing that, that ensures positive engagement with that, and you can get it down much easier. It actually does make a big difference, much more than you may think. So great job there. Indexing points on both sides of the gun. Magazine release is reversible, and the mags do a pretty good job of popping out of the gun. One thing they did that is very smart is this back strap. It's not replaceable, but it does come all the way down to the back. So with me, and you may be a little bit different, but with me, the fatty part of my hand does not engage with the magazine unless I really am like dug into the gun. Then it might, but overall, they do a really good job. And then of course, with the 12 round option, by the way, it comes with a 10 round flush, 12 round extended. It actually has a little bit of extension on this bottom here. That is not, of course, connected to the grip. It just kind of is there to match up with the grip. So that may be the one that people actually have an issue with because that will kind of stop on the fatty part of your hand. But the flush does not. And so that's a good thing because you can get that flush out of there, right? And get the 12 round back in. Really nice job. 18-degree grip angle, which is standard for all M&Ps. By the way, that texturing is, I think they struck the perfect balance here, okay? And I say that because they did, right? It's not too aggressive. Remember the M2.0s? Those things were freaking, I mean, they just went overboard. They were like, hey, they thought these guns were, you know, too slick or whatever. Yeah, they're never going to come out of your hand. So this is obviously toned down quite a bit, and they've been toning it down. But this, perfect. Great job there because, you know, the smaller the gun, the harder it is to hold, harder it is to shoot, and having a good texture there is fantastic. The specs are interesting. Very close to the original Bodyguard, where 2.75 inch barrel, so 2 3/4 inch barrel. We have 4.1 inches high with the standard 10 round mag. I'll talk more about sizing here in a second. We also have 9.8 ounces. The original Bodyguard was 11 3/4. 11, yeah, I think so. 11 3/4, somewhere in there. So it's actually a couple ounces lighter than that. For reference, compared to what I believe is the best 380 on the market, or has been, the 42, as far as sizing for sure, the 42 with an empty mag is like 13 ounces. So quite a bit lighter than some of those others. They definitely did something a little bit closer to the LCP Max than they did the Glock 42. Keep in mind the 42 is only 6 rounds. We have a viewport so we can see the brass down in the chamber. And of course, one of the biggest differences with this gun compared to the original, first of all, you can go with or without a safety on this one. You couldn't on the original. And this one does not have an internal hammer. It's now striker fired. Now, the original Bodyguard had a really wide grip. Think DB9. So in order to compensate for a micro gun, they actually went wide in here. Well, that makes it super awkward, especially when you couple that with essentially a double action trigger only, and that's what we had in the Bodyguard. Awful. One of the few Smith & Wessons that I actually just hated. So in this case, they didn't lengthen the grip, right? They actually pretty much kept with the same M&P profile, just obviously smaller. We have a stainless steel dual guide rod that is captive, of course, and now we have a flat face trigger. Before we get to the trigger here and show that, because that is a huge change on this gun, let me show you some of the size comparison to some of the other popular carry guns out there, including the Shield Plus. So as you can see, it is much closer in size to the Max, and then of course the 42. It's similar in size to that. 42 is 6 rounds, standard mag, flush configuration, while this one is 10. So you have an advantage there. One thing they didn't do, I don't think, is they didn't go too small on this, but it's still relatively small, especially when we compare it to the Spectre Comp or even like the Shield Plus. We don't think of those guns as big guns. They're really not in the big scheme of things. But when you compare it to a gun like this, man, it almost makes this thing look like a toy, although we of course know it is not any toy. One thing I think is cool is this is the first Smith & Wesson that I have received that actually has Maryville, Tennessee on here. So that I thought that was pretty awesome. Although the inside of the frame is still marked with Springfield, Massachusetts, the slide is marked Maryville. So thought that was pretty cool. Slide serrations, better sights. The sizing is good. What about the trigger though? The safety blade is a part of the trigger. It is the surface in which your finger is actually going to pull through on the trigger, right? We reset the trigger. Not too light and not too heavy. They struck a good balance there. We have an overstop travel in the bottom of the trigger guard there. And then the reset, right? Audible, tactile, a little bit far out. Not too bad though. And you basically, I mean, you have very little travel from all the way out to engaged. Pretty nice job. So overall, the trigger feels good. Better serrations, sights, sizing, magazine capacity, all great. My biggest concern is the weight. Very similar to what you'll find in the LCP Max. You go too light, even with the 380, they can be a little bit more difficult to shoot, right? That makes sense, right? Less weight, more recoil. That's why I always divert to the 42, probably being the best 380 because it strikes the perfect balance between weight and size. Capacity is lacking though, so we've been looking for a real replacement, a true replacement to the 42 that's going to offer better features, better sights, better trigger, but is also going to be as shootable as that gun. So if your notifications are on, you will be able to find that out very soon, because not only will I be taking this one out to the range, testing a couple of different types of ammo, but also I will be taking those other 380s, your LCP Max, your 42, and maybe even the Shield Plus, to give you an idea of what I think truly about this gun. A lot of the stuff they've done, I'm impressed with, but until we get to the range, obviously, make sure that it's reliable. I have no doubts because I've shot a lot of Smith & Wessons, but you still got to shoot them, right? We got to make sure that it works, of course. And I want to see what that recoil is like because they kept it under 10 ounces. So a little bit concerned about that, but we'll find that out soon enough. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. Big thanks to our patrons and channel members and our members over on Headshot Nation, which has a little bit more content for you guys if you are looking to join either a channel membership or Patreon. Headshot Nation, in my opinion, gives you actually a little bit more than those other two options. But all of you guys, I appreciate you so much, man. Really do. Big thanks. See you in the next one. And as always, hold 'em down.